The cabin door swung open slow, the hinges moaning like they hadn't been touched in a year. Dust hung thick in the slanted sunlight, and the smell of wood smoke drifted out into the cold mountain air. Inside, a woman stood barefoot on a threadbare rug, her hair long and dark as midnight, her eyes sharp enough to cut him where he stood. She didn't look surprised to see him. She didn't scream, didn't grab for a weapon. She just said, soft as a creek running under ice, "You took your time." That's how Hank Laramie found her, the woman he'd unknowingly bought when he paid cash for this cabin sight unseen. What he didn't know then, as he stood in that doorway with snow melting off his coat, was that she wasn't alone in those woods, and before the winter was out, one of them would be dead. The story starts months earlier, before the snow, when Hank Laramie wasn't looking for anything but peace. Hank was a man of few words and fewer friends, the kind of rancher who preferred horses to company. He'd run cattle across Wyoming plains most his life, slept under more stars than roofs, and by his 39th year, he'd seen enough of people to know they weren't worth trusting. The war had made sure of that. He'd come back from France with a limp and a taste for silence, and the isolation of Wyoming suited him fine. But one August afternoon, he walked into a dusty real estate office in town and laid down a stack of bills for a place he hadn't even seen. Folks thought he'd lost his mind. Cabins up near Granite Pass, the agent had said, sliding a single black and white photo across the desk. Old Trapper's Place. Been empty near on a decade. That's so. Hank studied the picture. Cabin looked like it had fall over in a strong wind. Needs some work, the man admitted. But it's cheap, whole parcel's yours. Creek runs through it. Land enough for a few head. Hank just nodded. He wasn't looking for perfect. He was looking for gone. Somewhere nobody'd bother him. The ride up took him 2 days, most of it on horseback after his truck gave out where the road turned to rock and pine. Granite Pass was higher than he'd remembered from cattle drives, the air thin and sharp with the smell of pitch and snow melt. Late summer, and still the nights bit cold. He rode through stands of aspen that whispered in the breeze like they were keeping secrets, and by the time he crested the last ridge, evening was settling in. The cabin sat at the edge of a clearing dark against the silver sweep of meadow grass. Roof sagging, porch slanted, chimney leaning like a drunk, but it was standing, and that was more than he'd hoped for. What he didn't see then, what he couldn't see, was the faint curl of smoke slipping from the chimney, thin as a breath. Now Hank wasn't a man to spook easy, but he also wasn't a fool. A cold cabin didn't smoke, and there weren't supposed to be folks within miles. He tied his horse to a pine and moved slow, hand resting on the butt of his colt. Snow started to fall, lazy flakes catching in his beard. He stepped up onto the porch, boards groaning under his boots, and that's when he heard it, faint and muffled through the door. A woman's voice, humming. Hank froze, every nerve shot. Here's the thing about Hank Laramie. He'd been in enough tight spots to know that hesitation could kill a man. So, he didn't wait. He pushed the door open hard, gun ready, and there she was, standing in the middle of the cabin, barefoot and calm, like she'd been expecting him all along. She had a rifle leaning against the wall behind her, but she made no move for it, just watched him with eyes that said she wasn't afraid. "You're late," she said. "Owner of this cabin," she said. He frowned. "Not anymore." That got the faintest flicker of a smile. "You paid cash to some banker in town," she said. "I live here, which makes me think you've been robbed." Hank didn't answer right away. He'd dealt with liars before. She didn't look like one. Didn't look scared either, and that was interesting. "Name," he said finally. "Evelyn," she replied. "And you're Hank Laramie, the man who just bought himself a heap of trouble." Now if you'd been standing there, smelling the pine smoke and old dust, hearing the storm start to roll in, you might have thought she was bluffing, but Hank knew that tone. He'd heard it from men in muddy trenches overseas, that low, steady calm that only came from someone who'd seen enough danger to make peace with it. And just like that, he knew this wasn't going to be simple. Evelyn moved like it was her place, adding wood to the stove, setting a pot of coffee to boil. Hank holstered his gun but didn't take his eyes off her. "You live here alone?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "Most days," she said finally. "Most." Hank had a rule about questions. Never ask one you weren't ready to answer yourself, but something about her made him push anyway. Why? She glanced up, met his eyes. Because nobody else will have me. There it was. Plain truth, said like it didn't bother her one bit. But Hank could see it in her posture, the way she held herself like a cornered wolf. Beautiful, sure, but dangerous. The wind howled through the eaves. Somewhere outside a tree cracked under the weight of snow. You should eat, she said, pouring him a cup of coffee. Storm's not letting up tonight. Hank sat at her table, steaming cup in hand, and thought about the gun within easy reach of her chair. Something told him this woman wasn't alone in these woods. And he was right. The snow didn't stop. By morning it was waist deep, a heavy white blanket that swallowed the clearing and muffled every sound. Hank stepped out onto the porch, breath steaming, and scanned the tree line. No tracks, no movement, just the quiet weight of winter pressing down. Inside, Evelyn was stirring a pot over the stove like she'd been doing it every morning for years. Calm, deliberate. She had that air about her, a woman who'd made peace with hard living. Breakfast, she said, setting a plate in front of him. Biscuits, eggs, bacon that tasted like it came off a smokehouse she'd built herself. Hank nodded his thanks but didn't stop watching her. You planning to explain why you're squatting in a cabin I paid good money for? She didn't bristle. Just poured herself coffee and sat across from him. I didn't take you for the talkative type, she said. I ain't. Then why start now? Hank set down his fork. Because I'd like to know what I walked into. Evelyn studied him a long moment. She was younger than he'd thought, 30, maybe 32, but her eyes were older. You ever heard of a man named Raymond Cutter? She asked. Hank shook his head. You will, she said, sipping her coffee. He waited. Evelyn leaned back, gaze flicking to the window, to the snow-laden trees beyond. I used to be his wife. The name meant nothing to Hank. Should I know him? Only if you read the papers. He runs cattle out of Montana. Big operation. Big money. And a temper like you wouldn't believe. Hank raised an eyebrow. So you left him? I ran, she said. Something in the way she said it made Hank's gut tighten. Married young, swept off her feet by a man 20 years older, who knew how to charm and how to scare. At first, the ranch life had been good. Big house, plenty of hands around. Then came the fights. Then came the bruises. She'd tried to leave once before. Cutter sent men after her, dragged her home. The second time, she planned better. Took cash, took a rifle, disappeared into the mountains where nobody'd find her. She'd been in this cabin nearly a year, keeping to herself. Hank listened without interrupting, leaning back in his chair. You think he's still looking for you, he said finally. Evelyn's eyes met his. I don't think, Mr. Laramie. I know, not when the snow had them both trapped. You figure he knows you're up here? Not yet, she said. But he will. There was no fear in her tone, just certainty. The land was beautiful, even under the heavy sky, pines bending with snow, water running black and cold through sheets of ice. He crouched by the bank, filling a canteen when he saw it, a single boot print. Half a mile from the cabin, fresh. The woods were silent, no bird song, no crack of branches. Whoever it was, they were good. Careful. He followed the tracks, a short way before they vanished on rocky ground. Whoever was out there knew how to cover their trail. Hank turned back, senses sharp, every step deliberate. When he reached the cabin, Evelyn was sitting by the window with her rifle across her knees. You saw them too, he said. She nodded. A night fell heavy and early. The wind rattled the shutters. Hank sat at the table cleaning his gun while Evelyn kept watch. Men like Cutter, Hank said finally. They don't stop. No, she agreed softly. Then why stay here? Why not keep running? Evelyn's hands were steady on the rifle. Because I'm tired of running. And Hank respected that. He also knew it could get them both killed. You got a plan? He asked. Survive the night, she said. They took shifts, one sleeping, one keeping watch. Hank woke at dawn to the smell of coffee, and Evelyn standing by the window, her posture tight. Two of them, she said. South Ridge. They're watching. Hank stood, heart beating steady. He moved to the window, spotted movement in the trees, just a flicker of shadow. 2 men, maybe more. Cutter's boys, Evelyn said. Armed? Always. He'd been hoping for solitude up here. Now it looked like he'd bought himself a war. You sure you want me here? He asked her. She looked at him, really looked. If you weren't here, I'd already be dead. The men in the woods stayed back, watching, waiting. Hank and Evelyn kept the fire low, curtains drawn. Neither said much. By evening, Hank knew they couldn't just sit and wait. Cutter's men had the numbers. They'd come eventually, and if the snow didn't bury them first, hunger would. We'll need to make a move, he said quietly. Evelyn's eyes flicked to his. You've got an idea, maybe. Maybe. He laid it out simple. There was an old ranger station 5 miles west, across rough terrain but stocked with supplies and a telegraph line. If they could make it there, maybe they could send word for help, though Hank doubted the law would get involved with a man as rich as Cutter. Still, it was a chance. Evelyn listened, expression unreadable. 5 miles in this snow, she said. You got a better idea? She didn't answer. That night, they packed light rifles, ammo, what food they could carry. Horses would be too easy to track. They'd go on foot. Evelyn moved with quiet efficiency, like she'd been preparing for this moment all along. Hank caught himself watching her, noticing the strength in her hands, the calm in her face. She wasn't just surviving, she was planning. Before dawn, they slipped out the back door into the bitter cold, snow crunching underfoot. The forest swallowed them quick, the cabin vanishing behind a curtain of trees. Hank led the way, scanning for movement, ears sharp for any sound out of place. They'd gone less than a mile when Evelyn froze, crouched low, voices, 2 men close. Hank dropped behind a fallen log, rifle ready. He caught sight of them through the branches, dark coats, wide-brimmed hats, rifles slung low. Cutter's men, no doubt about it. The men passed within 30 yards, talking in low tones. Hank's finger hovered near the trigger, but he didn't fire. Not yet. He waited until they were gone, then glanced at Evelyn. She nodded, and they moved on. They moved on. Hours passed. The cold bit deep. Snow fell steady, covering their tracks as fast as they made them. The ranger station was still miles away. As the sun dipped low, they reached a narrow ravine, ice crusting the rocks. Hank went first, boots slipping on the frozen slope. Evelyn followed, rifle slung across her back. Halfway down, a shot cracked through the stillness. Evelyn stumbled, fell hard. Snow sprayed. Evelyn. Hank's voice was sharp, carrying through the trees. Another shot rang out, splintering the rock near his head. Cutter's men had found them. The crack of that first rifle shot hung in the cold like a bell. Hank hit the ground hard, rolling to the side as a second bullet sparked against rock. Snow sprayed in his face. Evelyn was sprawled a few feet away, half hidden in the drift, her rifle still slung over her shoulder. You hit, he barked, crawling to her. She winced, gripping her arm. Blood darkened her sleeve, bright against the white snow. Grazed, she said through clenched teeth. Move, Hank growled, pulling her toward the shelter of a boulder, as another shot kicked up snow where she'd been. The ravine echoed with gunfire, sound bouncing off the walls until it was impossible to tell where the shooters were. Hank's heart was steady but hard, his breathing controlled. He'd been here before in France, crouched in mud, while machine guns chewed up the earth around him. He unslung his Winchester, peering over the rock. 2 men were on the ridge above, maybe 30 yards up, rifles braced on tree trunks. Another shadow flickered in the trees to the left. 3, maybe 4 total. They weren't amateurs. They were pushing Hank and Evelyn into a trap. She unslung her rifle with her good arm, checked the chamber. I can shoot, then cover me. Hank shifted position, aiming carefully. The first man on the ridge showed himself just long enough for Hank to squeeze the trigger. The Winchester roared, echoing like thunder. The man jerked backward, rifle tumbling from his hands. Got him, Hank muttered. Evelyn fired next, her shot cracking sharp and clean. The second man ducked back, snow exploding around him. Keep their heads down, Hank barked. Bullets tore into the snow around them, splintering bark and stone. Hank's world narrowed to sound and movement. The whistle of a bullet, the bark of his Winchester, the sting of ice against his face. He fired again, saw another man stagger, clutching his side before vanishing behind a tree. 2 down, he said. But they ain't done. Evelyn's breathing was ragged, her wounded arm pressed tight against her body, but she was calm, steady. She worked the bolt of her rifle with precision, scanning the ridge for targets. "They're flanking," she said suddenly. Hank turned, caught movement on the slope above them. A man creeping down, rifle raised. Hank fired quick, his bullet kicking up snow near the man's boots. The gunman dove for cover, returning fire. Splinters flew. Evelyn's shot cracked a heartbeat later, and the man went down hard, sliding lifeless into the ravine. The smell of gunpowder filled the cold air, sharp and bitter. Hank's ears rang with each report, but his mind was clear. He counted shots, movements, possibilities. Cutter's men weren't retreating. They were waiting for backup. "We gotta move," Hank said. "They'll box us in." Evelyn nodded grimly. The ravine sloped upward to the west, a narrow, snow-choked trail winding toward higher ground. Hank pointed. "That way, stay low." They moved fast, slipping and scrambling, bullets still snapping through the trees. Hank fired over his shoulder, keeping the gunman pinned. Evelyn climbed with grim determination, her breath harsh in the freezing air. Halfway up, she stumbled. Hank grabbed her good arm, hauling her behind another boulder. Blood stained her sleeve worse now, her face pale. "You're bleeding bad," he said. "Not dead yet," she shot back, gritting her teeth. Better. Gunfire echoed closer. Hank peered through the trees, spotting 2 more men advancing from below. They moved cautiously, rifles ready, boots crunching in the snow. "Stay down," Hank murmured. He leveled the Winchester, exhaled and fired. One man crumpled. The other dove for cover, firing wildly. Bullets ricocheted off the rocks. Evelyn took her shot, dropping him clean. The ravine went quiet for a moment, only the wind whistling through the pines. "Go," Hank said. They pushed on, climbing higher, snow soaking their boots and coats. Evelyn was slowing, the wound sapping her strength, but she didn't complain. Hank could hear shouts behind them now, more men closing in. Cutter's boys weren't giving up. They reached the top of the ridge, panting. The land stretched out in front of them, a maze of snow-covered pines and rocky slopes. Somewhere out there was the ranger station, 5 miles west. Hank scanned the terrain. "We keep moving. No tracks. They'll follow easy." Evelyn crouched, pulled a pine bough from the snow, and used it to sweep their trail. "Then we make it hard." They moved in zigzags, doubling back, breaking brush to confuse their pursuers. The storm was their ally now, snow falling thick and heavy, erasing footprints almost as fast as they made them. Hours passed. The cold was relentless, gnawing at their fingers and toes. Evelyn's pace slowed, but she kept moving, jaw set in determination. Hank watched her out of the corner of his eye. She was tougher than most men he'd served with overseas. "You're losing blood," he said quietly. "Seen worse," she muttered. "Not the point." He stopped them in a sheltered hollow, kneeling to examine her arm. The bullet had grazed her bicep, tearing flesh but missing bone. He cleaned it with snow, tore a strip from his shirt, and bound it tight. She hissed through her teeth but didn't cry out. "You've done this before," he said. "Once or twice." She managed a faint smile. They didn't linger. The forest was too quiet, the kind of quiet that meant hunters were close. Hank led them along a narrow game trail, the snow muffling every step. By dusk, the storm thickened again, a white curtain that made it nearly impossible to see more than 20 yards ahead. It was both blessing and curse. It hid them, but it also hid their enemies. Then Hank heard it, a branch snapping, close, evident. He froze, raising a hand. Evelyn crouched beside him, rifle ready. Another sound, a low murmur of voices, barely audible over the wind. "They're close," Hank whispered. He motioned for Evelyn to stay put and crawled forward on his belly, using the snow for cover. Through a gap in the trees, he spotted 3 men huddled near a rock outcrop, scanning the trail. Cutter's men. They'd been tracking them through the storm. Hank slipped back to Evelyn. 3 ahead, he murmured. "We can't sneak past them." Evelyn's eyes were steady. "Then we don't sneak." They set up quickly, using a fallen tree for cover. Hank's pulse slowed, his mind slipping into that cold, focused calm he'd learned in the trenches. He lined up his shot, waited for the wind to lull, and fired. The first man dropped instantly. Chaos erupted. The other 2 dove for cover, firing blindly. Evelyn's rifle cracked, and a second man fell, clutching his chest. The last man ran. Hank fired once more, catching him in the leg. The man tumbled into the snow, screaming. Hank moved fast, closing the distance with his Colt drawn. The wounded man raised his hands. "Please, where's Cutter?" Hank demanded. The man spat blood, fear flashing in his eyes. "He's coming. You can't run. He'll find her. He always." The shot was quick and merciful. Hank reloaded, breathing hard. Evelyn limped over, face pale but expression calm. "They'll know we killed him," she said. "They already knew we weren't easy prey," Hank replied. They didn't waste time. Snow was falling thicker now, erasing the scene almost as fast as it happened. Hank grabbed supplies off the dead men: ammo, food, a flask of whiskey. Evelyn took another rifle, slinging it over her good shoulder. By nightfall they found shelter in a rocky overhang, just enough to block the wind. Hank built a small fire, careful to keep it hidden from sight. Evelyn sat close, her face lit by the flicker of flames. Exhaustion etched deep into her features. "You ever think you'd end up like this?" Hank asked quietly. She glanced at him, eyes tired but sharp. "Running through the mountains, hunted like an animal." "No, but I knew marrying Raymond Cutter was a mistake the moment I said I do." Hank poured her a sip of whiskey, then took one himself. "Men like him, they don't stop till someone makes 'em." Evelyn met his gaze, firelight dancing in her eyes. "Then maybe it's time someone did. Not for weather, not for distance." Cutter himself was probably out there now, furious and relentless. Hank leaned back against the cold rock, rifle across his lap, and made himself a promise. They'd make it to that ranger station, and if Cutter wanted a fight, Hank Laramie would give him one he'd never forget. Somewhere in the dark woods beyond their small circle of firelight, a wolf howled. Morning came slow and gray, a pale light filtering through the storm cloud. The snow had stopped, leaving the world blanketed in white so deep that every sound carried for miles. Hank Laramie stirred from his light doze, rifle still across his lap. His breath rose in faint clouds as he scanned the tree. Evelyn was awake, leaning against the rock wall of their shelter, her face pale but alert. Her wounded arm was bound tight, the bleeding slowed, but she looked like she hadn't slept at all. "You're still breathing," Hank said quietly, voice low and rough. She managed a faint smile. "You're a good guard dog. Old habits," he muttered. Hank pushed himself up, brushing snow from his coat. The storm had done them a favor, erasing their tracks. But Cutter's men were no fools. They'd be circling wide, probing, trying to guess where Hank and Evelyn would head. The ranger station was still miles away, too far to reach in a straight shot without being spotted. "We'll move at first light," Hank said. "Head west. Keep low." Evelyn adjusted her rifle with her good arm. "You think they'll come at us today?" Hank looked out at the silent forest. It was too quiet. The kind of quiet that prickled at a man's instincts. "They're already here," he said. They broke camp quickly, stamping out the small fire, making sure nothing was left behind. Hank led the way, Evelyn close behind, her breath ragged but steady. The snow was waist-deep in some drifts, slowing them to a crawl. Hank moved like a predator, stopping often to listen, scanning the ridges and shadows. By mid-morning they reached a narrow canyon, its walls steep and slick with ice. It was a dangerous path, but it cut hours off their route. "We take it," Hank said. Evelyn nodded, no hesitation in her eyes. She was tough, tougher than most folks Hank had ever met. They'd gone less than 100 yards into the canyon when Hank froze. A faint sound carried on the wind. "Horse," he signaled Evelyn to get down, and they ducked behind a fallen tree, pressing themselves into the snow. Hank crawled forward, peering through a crack in the canyon wall. 5 riders moved along the ridge above, dark shapes against the white sky. At the front was a man Hank recognized even from a distance, broad-shouldered, wearing a long black coat and a wide-brimmed hat. His posture was relaxed, confident. Cutter. He'd known men like Cutter his whole life, charming devils who could smile at you while planning your funeral. Cutter was dangerous, not just because he was ruthless, but because he was patient. The riders passed, scanning the canyon below. Hank held his breath until they disappeared into the trees. "They've got the high ground," Evelyn whispered. "Not for long," Hank muttered. They waited until the sound of hoofbeats faded before moving again, sticking close to the canyon wall. Hank's mind was running fast, weighing options. Cutter had at least 5 men with him, maybe more spread out in the woods. They weren't just hunting, they were herding, trying to box Hank and Evelyn in. And it was working. They made it through the canyon and into a stretch of thick pine. Hank stopped, crouched low, and studied the snow. Tracks. Several sets. Fresh. "They're circling us," he said quietly. Evelyn's grip tightened on her rifle. "Then let's not let him." Hank smiled faintly. She had grit. They moved off the trail, climbing a steep ridge. The snow made it grueling, but Hank knew the higher ground gave them an edge. They reached a rocky outcrop overlooking the valley, just in time to see Cutter's riders below, fanning out in a search pattern. Hank raised his Winchester, resting it on the rock. Cutter himself was dismounted now, scanning the ground like a wolf on the scent. "Could take him now," Evelyn whispered. Hank considered it. One clean shot, and this whole hunt could end. But something held him back. Cutter wasn't just a man, he was a symbol. Kill him here, and the rest of his men might come down harder. Better to know exactly where every one of them was before they started shooting. "Not yet," Hank murmured. They waited, watching as Cutter's men spread out. One rider came close to their ridge, his horse snorting in the cold air. Hank signaled for Evelyn to stay still. The man passed within 30 feet of their hiding spot, completely unaware. Hank's finger twitched on the trigger, but he held his fire. Patience would keep them alive. When the riders finally moved off, Hank led Evelyn deeper into the trees, heading but Cutter's net was tightening. Twice more they had to dive for cover as men passed nearby. The forest felt alive with danger, every snapping twig and shifting shadow a warning. By late afternoon, Evelyn was pale with exhaustion, her wounded arm trembling. Hank called a halt in a small clearing, scanning the terrain. "They're driving us," he said, "pushing us where they want us." Evelyn leaned against a tree, breathing hard. "Then maybe we should stop letting." Hank's eyes flicked to a rocky hill nearby, its slope steep but climbable. From up there they'd have a view of the whole valley, a fighting position. "You got fight left in you?" he asked. Evelyn gave him a hard look. "Enough." They climbed. The snow was slick, the rocks treacherous, but they made it to the top as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the valley. From their vantage point, Hank could see movement below, Cutter's men spreading out, closing in. "This is it," Hank said. "We hold 'em here." Evelyn set her jaw. "Then let's make it count." They set up quickly, using boulders for cover. Hank laid out spare ammo, checked his Winchester, and handed Evelyn a revolver for her offhand. "Keep your head low," he said. "Pick your shots. Make 'em count." Evelyn nodded, eyes sharp. The first riders appeared just as the sky turned purple with dusk. Hank fired first, dropping a man from his saddle. The crack of the Winchester echoed through the mountains, and chaos erupted below. Cutter's men dismounted, taking cover and returning fire. Bullets whined off the rocks around Hank and Evelyn, chips of stone flying. Evelyn fired steadily, her aim deadly even with one arm. A man tumbled into the snow, his rifle skidding away. "They're flanking left," she shouted. "I see." Hank swung his rifle, fired, and another man went down. The fight turned fierce. Cutter's men advanced in bursts, using the trees for cover. Hank moved like a machine, reloading smoothly, his shots precise. Evelyn stayed low, calm under fire, her revolver barking when her rifle was too slow to reload. "3 left," Hank muttered, counting the bodies sprawled below. Then a voice cut through the gunfire. "Laramie!" Hank froze. The voice was deep, smooth, and cold. "Cutter! Laramie!" the voice called again. "You got something of mine. Send her down and I might let you live." Evelyn's jaw tightened. She whispered, "He means me." Hank didn't answer right away. He scanned the tree line, searching for the source of the voice. Cutter stood in the open, hat low, hands empty. A show of confidence. "Come on now," Cutter called. "You're a soldier, ain't you? You know how this ends. Save yourself the trouble." Hank's lips curved in a grim smile. "Yeah, I know how it ends," he muttered. He sighted in on Cutter's chest, finger tightening on the trigger. But Cutter moved fast, ducking behind a tree just as Hank fired. The bullet splintered bark inches from his head. Gunfire erupted again, and the fight was back on. Hank cursed, firing at shadows. Evelyn took down another man. Her shot clean. 2 left, Hank shouted. Then Cutter made his move. He broke from cover, sprinting low and fast, a shotgun in his hands. Hank barely had time to fire. The bullet grazed Cutter's coat, but the man dove behind a boulder halfway up the hill. "Get ready," Hank said, breath coming hard. Cutter's voice rang out again. "You're good, Laram, but I've killed better men than you." Hank's reply was cold and steady. "You ain't met me yet." Their snow fell softly now, flakes drifting through the fading light. But the tension was razor sharp. Cutter was close, too close. Evelyn reloaded with shaking hands. "We could run," she whispered. Hank shook his head. He'd follow. "This ends tonight." They waited, rifles ready, as silence settled over the mountain. The last of Cutter's men was out there somewhere, but Cutter himself was the real threat. Hank could feel it. The man moved like a predator, patient and calculating. Then a shadow shifted. Hank fired instantly, catching the last gunman in the chest. That left just Cutter. The mountains were silent again, save for the whisper of snow. Hank and Evelyn crouched behind their rocks, eyes scanning the trees. Somewhere out there, Cutter was watching, waiting. And Hank knew the next move would decide everything. The mountain went quiet after that last shot. A silence so deep it rang in Hank Laramie's ear. He stayed crouched, Winchester steady, eyes sweeping the snowy ridgeline. Evelyn was beside him, pale from blood loss, but sharp-eyed, her revolver gripped tight. Somewhere out there, Cutter was alive, waiting. And Hank knew a man like Cutter didn't wait long. The snow was falling thicker now, the kind of slow, heavy flakes that muffled everything. Shadows deepened under the trees. Hank's breath curled in mist, his heartbeat loud in his own ears. He leaned close to Evelyn. "Stay low, don't move unless I tell you." She didn't argue. Hank slung the Winchester over his shoulder and drew his Colt. Cutter was too close for rifles now. This was going to end up close, real close. He slipped from cover, crouched low, every step careful. His boots crunched softly in the snow. The cold bit into his fingers, but his focus was razor sharp. Somewhere ahead, Cutter was stalking him too. 2 predators circling in the snow. Hank moved between 2 boulders, scanning the trees. He caught a flicker of motion, a shadow that didn't belong. He froze, then a shotgun roared. The blast ripped bark from the tree inches from Hank's head. He dropped flat, rolling behind a fallen log as snow sprayed into the air. Cutter's voice echoed through the storm. "You're a hard man to kill, Laramie." Hank wiped snow from his face and yelled back, "So are you." The forest went silent again. Hank's mind worked fast. Cutter was moving, circling. He wanted Hank to flinch, to give away his position. But Hank had hunted men before. He knew the game. He slipped to his left, silent as a ghost, circling the clear. He caught another shadow, a dark figure slipping behind a spruce tree. Cutter. Hank raised his Colt, but Cutter was fast. The outlaw spun out from behind the tree, shotgun raised. Hank dove sideways as the blast roared, pellets tearing through his coat sleeve. He hit the snow hard, rolled and fired. The Colt cracked twice. One bullet grazed Cutter's hat, the other splintered the tree beside him. Cutter ducked back, cursing. "Hell of a shot, old man," Cutter called, his voice cool. "But you're slow." Hank chuckled dryly. "Still fast enough to put you in the ground." A low laugh rolled out from the outlaw. "Maybe, but I didn't get this far by being easy to kill." Evelyn shifted behind her cover, trying to get a clear angle. Hank caught her movement and shook his head sharply. "Stay put," he mouthed. She hesitated but obeyed. The snow thickened, the forest dimming into twilight. Hank could feel Cutter's presence like a predator feels another predator. Close, tense, waiting for a mistake. Then Cutter spoke again, voice close and, "You know, Laramie, this don't have to end with you dying. Hand over the girl, walk away." Hank's jaw tightened. "Ain't gonna happen. She's not your fight." Cutter barked. "She is now." A pause. Then Cutter laughed low and cold. "You're a fool, Laramie." Being called worse. Hank shifted again, moving uphill. He could see Cutter's shape now, crouched behind a tree, shotgun in hand. Cutter was scanning the wrong direction. Hank took a slow, steady breath, sighted down his Colt. A twig snapped under his boot. Cutter spun like lightning, shotgun coming up. Hank dove behind a boulder, just as another blast thundered. Pellets sprayed stone and snow. "Close, ain't it?" Cutter called. "Too close," Hank muttered. They traded fire in bursts, each shot echoing like thunder in the silent forest. Hank felt the sting of a graze on his cheek, blood hot against the cold air. Cutter moved like a ghost, flanking left, never staying in one place. But Hank was reading him now. Cutter wasn't reckless, he was deliberate. Every move was calculated. And that gave Hank an idea. He crawled low through the snow, circling back toward Evelyn. She looked up, wide-eyed. "You hit. Not bad," Hank whispered. "I'm gonna draw him in. When he moves, you take the shot. You hear me?" Evelyn swallowed hard. "I don't have a clean angle. You will." Hank moved out again, making noise now, snapping branches, crunching through snow. He wanted Cutter to hear him. "Come on, Cutter," Hank bellowed, "or you gonna hide all night." Cutter's voice came sharp from the shadows. "Careful what you wish for." The outlaw moved fast, flanking hard. Hank caught a flash of his black coat through the trees. Cutter was charging, shotgun raised, teeth bared in a wolf's grin. Hank fired twice, missed once, grazed him the second. Cutter didn't slow. Hank dove for cover as Cutter closed in. The shotgun roared, spraying pellets into the boulder. Hank hid behind. The outlaw was only 20 feet away now, advancing like a predator. "End of the line, Laramie." Cutter snarled. Then Evelyn's rifle cracked. Cutter staggered, hit in the shoulder. He spun, snarling, and dove behind a tree. "You little," Cutter cursed, returning fire in her direction. Snow exploded around Evelyn, forcing her back. Hank used the distraction, popping out from cover and firing. Cutter ducked low, but Hank's bullet clipped his leg. The outlaw stumbled, growling like an animal. "Looks like you're bleeding now, Cutter," Hank called. Cutter laughed, voice ragged. "I've bled before." The man was still dangerous, too dangerous to underestimate. Hank moved in carefully, Colt raised. Cutter was crouched low, breathing hard, eyes scanning for movement. Then suddenly, Cutter tossed his empty shotgun aside and drew a revolver. The two men locked eyes. "Let's finish it," Cutter snarled. They fired almost at the same time. Cutter's bullet tore into Hank's side, spinning him half around. Hank's shot slammed into Cutter's chest, knocking him back against the tree. Cutter roared in pain, staggering forward, firing again. Hank dove behind cover, blood soaking his coat. Evelyn screamed his name, firing wildly at Cutter. The outlaw kept coming, relentless, blood streaming from his chest, but fury driving him forward. Hank gritted his teeth, forced himself up and fired again. His bullet caught Cutter in the gut. Cutter stumbled, dropped to one knee, but raised his revolver again. "You don't get to win," Cutter hissed. Hank's final shot hit him square in the heart. Cutter's body jerked, the revolver slipping from his hand. He fell backward into the snow, staring up at the gray sky, breath rattling once, twice, then gone. The forest went quiet again. Evelyn scrambled to Hank's side, dropping her rifle. "You're bleeding bad," she said, voice trembling. Hank pressed a hand to his side, grunting. "Ain't the first time." She tore a strip from her coat and pressed it to his wound. Hands shaking. "Stay with me, Hank." He gave her a faint smile. "I'm not going anywhere." They sat there for a long moment, snow falling softly around them. Cutter's body lay still in the clearing, his black coat stark against the white snow. It was over. But Hank knew they weren't safe yet. "We need to move," he said, voice hoarse, "before the rest of his boys come sniffing around." Evelyn helped him up, slipping under his arm for support. Together they stumbled through the snow, leaving the battlefield behind. The trek to the ranger's station was brutal. Hank was pale, his breath ragged, but he stayed on his feet. Evelyn pushed herself harder than she thought possible, half dragging him up icy slopes and through waist-deep snow. By dawn, they reached the small log cabin station. Smoke curled from its chimney, and a U.S. Marshal's badge gleamed on the door. Hank collapsed on the porch, exhausted. Inside, the station's marshal, a grizzled old man named Whitaker, stared in shock as Evelyn helped Hank inside. "Good Lord," Laramie Whitaker muttered. "You look like hell." "Been worse," Hank said with a faint grin. Whitaker listened as Evelyn told the story, her voice steady despite everything they'd been through. When she finished, Whitaker shook his head. "Cutter's been a ghost for years," he said. "You're telling me he's dead as winter," Hank muttered. Whitaker gave a low whistle. "You just saved a lot of folks, a lot of trouble." Over the next few days, Whitaker's men tracked down what was left of Cutter's gang. Most scattered when they heard their leader was gone. Evelyn's wound healed slow, but she never let go of her rifle. Hank, stitched and bandaged, spent most of his time on the porch, staring at the mountains. "You should rest," Evelyn told him one evening. He gave her a tired smile. "I'll rest when I'm dead." When the roads cleared, Whitaker offered them an escort back to town. Evelyn accepted, but Hank hesitated. "You comin'?" she asked, tilting her head. Hank looked at the snow-covered mountains, then at her. "You'll be safe now," he said. "Cutter's gone." "You think I want safe?" she said softly. After all this, he met her gaze. There was steel in her eyes now, a survivor's strength. Finally, he nodded. "All right, let's go." They rode out together at dawn, the mountains fading behind them. Cutter's ghost would linger out there in the snow and silence, but Hank Laramie had done what he came to do. He'd kept her alive, and for a man like him, that was enough.